Hey everybody, Invisiblekatana here with my review for Voltron Season 7, or the final season of Voltron. Or is it Season 8? Whatever season it is, it's the final season, so it doesn't really matter. But recently watched this, I think it was about 2 days ago I finished, and excuse me, it was interesting. Going through this season, I didn't realize it was the final season. I never look up a lot of info for the shows I watch. I also had like one bit of information where I heard that it was actually there were going to be multiple seasons, but I think that was said because they weren't announcing that it was the final season, because it was actually at a convention where Jeremy Shadow was there, and my friend went to a panel he was at, and he mentioned like, oh, we have a few more seasons. And it's funny that that's what I heard, because I that conversation we had specifically came up because I was like, man, the next season is going to be the last one, right? Because it seems like they're kind of heading towards the end. And she was like, no, he said they have a few more seasons. I was like, oh, that's interesting, because I'm like, it feels like it's right at the end for me, and turns out that's exactly what it was. They just couldn't announce it at the time. Um, but a very interesting final season. Disappointed a lot of people, and this is actually my second time doing this review, because I did it the night that I finished it, and like, something happened with my camera, and it just like the video is actually too long, so my camera like reached its limit, and I didn't realize. So I had time to think about it and kind of cut to the chase of what I did and did not like. All in all, I didn't hate it. I'm not with a lot of people on Twitter saying, like, fuck Voltron and stuff like that. I totally understand why they are. But for me, it wasn't as horrific. It wasn't as terrible. And part of it was because a lot of the stuff that came up was the relationship stuff. And for me, I never cared much for that at all anyway in Voltron, admittedly. Like, whether it was like the gay relationships or the straight relationships, none of that really meant anything to me. In all honesty, like, it just never had an impact. I was like, I just feel like none of the relationship stuff ever meant anything. And maybe, oddly enough, with the way the season kind of went, now that I think about it, maybe that's true. Maybe that's always actually been the case. They kind of proved that that was true. It just never really meant much, even when they kind of shot it straight to the top, like, oh, brand new relationship that's built up throughout the series, and death. And then it kind of just cuts it there. And it was like, nothing. And, with Shiro, he does end up marrying someone, but a lot of people were upset that it just ends up being like this random person we've literally never seen before. Um, so it's like, yeah, I kind of understand why people were upset, in those elements, where it's like, it was kind of, people felt like it was just done just to make up for the fact that, like, they killed his boyfriend in, I guess that was the last season when they did the flashback, where they just killed his boyfriend, like, off screen as well. It's just like, it just happened and he was dead. And then it was kind of just like, all right, well, poof, we'll make up for it now. And he married someone else. So I can understand why people were upset by that. Personally, like I said, I wasn't, and maybe, like I said, for all the relationship stuff, the only one that affected me the most was the Lance and Allura stuff, and that really is only due to the fact that Allura, of course, dies at the end, because otherwise it would have been like, oh, well, that's good for them, and cool. But even that, even with them kind of playing it up, they didn't play it up that much. There's a lot of stuff throughout this season, and when I was doing my first version of this review, my first take on it, I kind of realized as I was doing the review, like, what exactly kind of didn't gel too well for the season for me. Because going through, like, pretty much every season, I'm always, like, kind of half watching the episodes, but I know when something's missing, because if it's really big, it'll stick out. Even if I'm doing something else, big moments stick out. And something that I noticed that really bugged me was with Minerva. And it was the fact that I felt we never got any really great emotion from her character until the very end. And it was the stuff with Allura, like, which basically it was Allura saying, and it wasn't Minerva realizing anything and getting that emotion. It was Allura saying, like, you used to be this, you used to feel these emotions, and now you've changed. And then Minerva's kind of just like, yeah, I did, and you get that emotion. And I was like, I wanted that a super long time ago. In fact, the exact moment that I wanted it was when they show that Lotor is dead, which was another thing I didn't like. Which, that one I totally agree on with a lot of people, where they were upset that Lotor was dead. I was the exact same way, because I think I mentioned in my review for the last season, I was like, all right, well, the whole idea is, what's going to happen with Lotor? I was like, obviously, and this is just writing 101. If somebody's off in another dimension or another space and they don't die, specifically in this sequence where they're left behind, they're coming back. And the whole mystery is like, well, how are they going to come back different? Like, what's going to happen? And I was really excited, because when Minerva succeeds, which was immediately one of my favorite parts of this season, because she was kind of basically destroying them the entire season, and I kind of enjoyed watching them. They made it, but they were losing the entire time. So I actually liked that for the season. But during that scene where seemingly she saves Lotor and brings him from the void, I was like, okay, well, something's a little off, and at this point she's controlling him, and we have the one character who I think does get a name when she gets killed by Nerva at the end. But she tries to warn her friend, like, don't go near him because she realizes something's off, and then he gets killed by Lotor. And so then it's like, all right, well, Lotor has kind of lost it a little bit. Nerva was somewhat controlling him at this point. But it's like, well, he's lost it a little bit. He's a bit out of control. So let's see how this plays out. And I was kind of hoping that we would get to see Lotor, with him being the character that he is, he's very, structured. And we saw moments of him cracking where it's like he's about to lose something or he gets busted, like at the end of the last season. And he kind of flips out. And I was like, I'd like to see a twist on that. It's not really him freaking out. It's him legitimately kind of being lost and legitimately insane, which speaks to volumes of what they could have done considering everything that Nerva went through. Is like, how do you not have that parallel storyline play out where it's her having gone through it and then she finally gets her son back and now he's currently going through it, and it's like, all right, well, now I can kind of guide him. I can bring him back faster than I came back, which was, decades and decades after technically dying. So, still a bit of a different situation. But I felt like that would have been really good. But even with Lotor dying, I was like, all right, that sucks. But during the quick segment where they show his body for like a split second and he's like kind of melted inside the machine, I was like, all right, in that moment, I felt was the perfect opportunity to have Nerva have emotion. Whereas like this is the heartfelt reason to sympathize with the villain. Like, that's always an entertaining thing. Sometimes it's cool to just have a villain that's just crazy and fun, but that was never the point. That was never the case, I guess, with the Nerva. Like, it was always kind of the point that her whole goal was to bring her son back, and then it was like, oh, well, he's gone. And it makes sense. What she did after that, like, story-wise, it still makes sense. I just felt like it was missing a really great opportunity because it goes the natural route, which is she brought her son back, but he was actually dead. And so then after that, her plan escalates to, I'll leave and go to another dimension to have my son again. It's like, that makes perfect sense. She goes to another dimension, which doesn't officially happen until like the end of the season. And so it's her husband, Zarkon. I always end up forgetting his name until like I say her husband. But it's like her, it's Zarkon, and then Lotor is there. And it's like this perfect dimension where everything's good except for the fact that she died. And like Lotor's still a kid and stuff like that, which kind of surprised me. I thought it was going to be adult Lotor when she went to the other dimension. And I was like, oh, that's kind of weird. But, she goes through and everything worked out perfectly. And, it's her son. It's like everything is good. And then, of course, it starts to fall apart. And then, Voltron comes in and they take her out. But I was like, it makes sense. That makes perfect sense that that's what they would do. But there are so many ways that it could have gone and been more entertaining to me. For one, Lotor being alive would have just been a million times better. And then it could have been, after they end up together, it's like, well, now that we're together, what if we found that perfect version of Zarkon? And they still could have done, the interdimensional thing, and I think it would have worked out perfectly. So it was like, all right, Lotor's gone, so that sucks. And then, you have the emotion stuff. That doesn't really happen either until like the very end of the season when, like I said, it's actually Allura that's even bringing it up. So I was like, well, that kind of sucks because I felt like that wasn't there. And a big reason I noticed this, like I said, as far as even if I'm doing other stuff, I noticed when they do the big emotional beats, because the one thing I certainly noticed was Lance and Allura, where something was happening and Lance was freaking out because they're officially together now. And it's like, I don't want her to get hurt. I don't feel like we should be using her. We don't know what we're dealing with. And so, they have those moments. And so those were played up. And I was like, all right, I'm definitely noticing those emotional beats and stuff like that. Never happened with the Nerva. And it was just like, missed opportunity. Did some cool stuff with her because mostly, honestly, she was winning all the fights. That was really like the cool thing they did. And admittedly, that was about it. But yeah, I was like, man. And then a big thing that I realized is there's a ton of stuff in this. I think really to sum up this entire season, I would say I had greater expectations and they literally all just ended in death. Like everything was like, I think this is going here. The characters are just dead. And that was it. That was legitimately it. Lance and Allura being together, I was okay with that. I thought it was actually cool because, he always had feelings for her. And, they naturally just ended up bonding over time. And, the stuff where he says, like, he loves me. He's like, I have for a long time. I was like, that makes sense because they have legitimately been together for years. And he always had feelings for her. So it makes sense that he would say that so early. It wasn't just like a super crazy thing where it's like, oh, he's the weird guy. Like, they just met and he loves her. I was like, okay, that makes sense. Even if he said it really fast, it's one of those situations where it's like, all right, you can give it a pass for that. It being like overly sappy and stuff and super quick. It's like, it makes sense because they've been fighting literally an interplanetary war, in some cases, an interdimensional war, for years now. So it's like, it makes sense that they would have that connection. And, I'm expecting this build up and this, emotional relationship to happen, and the ultimate final battle is, Laura dealing with the darkness and all that stuff that they went through. And then it would culminate in them ultimately succeeding. And then it works. And they just have that relationship. And then the other, whatever else happens. And instead she dies. And then the same thing happens with Enerva. Expecting Lotor to come back in this really cool new way where he has to kind of rebuild himself to the character that he was and all this other stuff. He's dead. Even minor stuff that didn't even matter. The girl that I mentioned that was trying to protect her friend from Lotor because she knew something was wrong, she does that, and then she turns against Enerva at the end of the season as well, and she just dies. I was like, oh, okay, because when that first happened, I was like, okay, she's going to turn against Enerva because she noticed something's weird, and I thought it was going to build up with her character where she realizes, kind of like Lotor's generals did. I thought it would be the same thing, just done in the span of a season, where it's something's off here. We're fighting to save Lotor, and then we bring him back, but he's not the same, and if there was some extra content there, maybe Enerva would have been hiding the fact that Lotor was dead. Because in that flashback, if I remember correctly, we only see Enerva standing over Lotor when the ship is actually open. So maybe it could have been she hid it from everyone else, and no one else gets to see Lotor. And she's like, I don't want anyone disturbing my son, but actually he's been dead the whole time. Something like that. But nothing happens. It was just that one moment, and then the very end, the same thing happened where she's like, holy crap, I don't need to be working for Enerva. I got to stop her. And then Enerva's just like, nah. And she blasts her and she's dead. And I was like, normally there's a whole story from the betrayal of a character and them seeing the light, all that extra stuff. And that just did not happen. Not for her character, at least. They do kind of go through that a little bit with some of the people that are captured. But I thought that was kind of the point of them showing her having these, realizing something was wrong with Lotor, was to have that kind of go throughout the season where it would build up and she would ultimately help them. Even if she did sacrifice herself at the end and she just died, I thought it was going to be a bit of a grinder build up, considering it was kind of like a little tease where it was oh, that's what that's for, her noticing something's wrong. And then that builds up throughout the season until she betrays Enerva, which is exactly what happened, except you don't ever really see anything. And if they do, it could have just been one of those mini moments that wasn't really built up. So I was just I probably missed it. So that's totally possible that I did miss it. But I felt like it was legitimately, she realized something was wrong with Lotor. She tried to save her friend and he died. And then at the very end, after, the truth is revealed, she tries to attack Enerva, and then Enerva just kills her in one blast, and that was it. And I was like, oh, well, that's game over. That's it. There was no big build up, or seemingly there was going to be a build up, and then it just kind of went through, and it was beginning and end, and she's dead. And I feel like that's a great summation of the entire final season, is that all the stuff where I kept expecting much grander elements literally just ended in the character is actually dead, or they've already been dead, or they get killed, and that's it. And then of course that leads to the final moment, which is Allura's death. Her sacrifice, even at the end, which is so legitimately out of nowhere. There's literally no argument for it. It's so out of nowhere. The other characters in the show are like, huh, you're leaving? That's how out of nowhere it is. They even wrote it into the show that it was just poof out of nowhere. Allura had to sacrifice herself with Enerva in order to restore the other timelines and stuff. And that just kind of sucked. And it's just the fact that it ends in that way. And it wasn't, it would be one thing if it was a death during battle, and I'm sure people would still be completely upset, and that would make perfect sense to be upset no matter what when a character dies. But for it to be this way, where it's just yeah, I have to go. I have to sacrifice myself at the end because... And they once again, they probably explained it in there somewhere, and I was just so stunned that I wasn't paying enough attention. But I'm like, why couldn't they just write it where Enerva dies and she sacrifices her quintessence? The whole thing is that she's magic and she's been using quintessence. She's absorbing it from the creatures and stuff. When they, literally at the end, they try to stop her. They're like, all right, we stopped her. And then she shoots the crazy Gundam wings off at the thing. I can't remember the name of it. And she absorbs the quintessence to use it as a supplement to open up the portal to the other dimensions. And they're like, holy crap, we screwed up by bringing this thing here. And it was just why couldn't it just be that she still has enough within her or whatever, and then that's it, and it just works, and then that allows for the timelines to come back because they defeat her, and then that releases the quintessence or whatever. You just literally, it's quintessence. That's the answer for everything. It's kind of like Naruto. It's just this DNA, this space DNA. Like that's all there is to it. Sorry if you don't get that reference, but you know what I mean. The Hashirama DNA, Senju DNA. But yeah, it was just like, man, this is super crazy. Just right at the end, Allura's like, I have to sacrifice myself, see everybody. Lance gets the the Altean marks, which I was like, that's super cute. But yeah, not good enough. It's not it's not cute enough to make up for the loss of a character, especially in a slow pace sort of sacrifice that didn't. I mean, like I said, it literally came so out of nowhere that the other characters were stunned that it was about to happen. Where it's like, yeah, I have to give up myself in order to do it because that's the only way we have enough power to bring back the other timelines. So I thought it was super crazy, and I understand why people are super pissed about that with that ending. And then, of course, that led to some of the other stuff that kind of made me laugh, where people mentioned Lance, being the Cuban guy, like he ended up being a farmer and stuff. And I thought it was funny reading that on Twitter, where people were upset about that. But for me, it was just the simple fact that they killed off Fuller. I wasn't even thinking about like the Cuban thing and all that. It was kind of the racism and the race element of all that. It was just the crappy element of the entire situation. And me not ever doing a lot of background info for the shows I watch. A lot of people mention how there's like these big promises where Lance will have, I think it was like what he deserves, or what he deserves and not what he needs, or what he needs and not what he wants, something like that. And then it ultimately ends up happening like this, and them kind of the creators basically saying it kind of won't be this, but then that ends up being what it is, where Lance is people saw him as like the rebound guy. I personally didn't see that, because Lance and Lotor, they kissed once, and then instantly right after that they found the betrayal. So it's not like it kind of built up that they got closer, but it's not like they were actually in a relationship. So I was like, I don't see Lance as like the rebound guy because of that situation. It was just like, that's kind of just what ended up happening. They ultimately got together, and it was really because Lance asked. It's not like it's because Allura did. But yeah, it was just, for me, it was more the death element, where it's just like, well, that sucks. Out of nowhere, poof, it happens. We lose a character at the end, and then we get our, the little time cards, at the end, like, old school movie. It's like, this is what happens, and Hunk did food, and Shiro got married, and Keith's mom, and the other dude, part of the Blade of Mamura, they became like the leaders of the council, the coalition. So, it just ends, and it's like, all right, well, there it is. It ends and the lines go off. They do have a great, like, that very final scene where they're in space and it's like a silhouette of Allura, like, in the galaxy. I thought that was a really great, like, final shot. But yeah, it's just, there's some disappointing stuff, obviously, within the season, but I don't know. It's just a crazy way to end it, losing a character in such a, I can't say it's a nonchalant way, but it felt very lackluster compared to what I felt it could have been. Even if there was hints of it, like I said, I could have missed it, could have been missing it. But I felt like all the characters were there during that entire final journey. They don't really split up when they're going through a nervous mind and stuff like that. So the fact that they were all surprised too, I was like, all right, well, I don't think I missed that much for that to not be there. There weren't really any scenes where Allura was kind of like by herself. Once again, half paying attention, so I take that with a grain of salt. You guys probably remember something that was definitely like, here's that big hint, and I just missed it. But it was just like, man, just poof, right at the end there, and they saved their final timeline, and then she has to sacrifice herself, and it was just like disappointing. So, in summation, like I said, lots of grand ideas I was hoping for, lots of thoughts where I was like, this will go here, this could go here, could go there, and then what was it, 1, 2, like all three of those things, just death, minor stuff to big stuff. Lotor dead, Allura dead, that random female character, I can't remember her name, but she's dead. The only person that didn't die was the one woman, the Lotor's former general, and I thought she was going to fall in the volcano. I thought she was actually going to die. She looked the one person that didn't. And that was just kind of how it was. It was like, all right, well, that is what it is, and that's the end of Voltron. So they screwed up. A lot of people are super duper pissed. I'm disappointed, not like 100%. I still enjoyed it as I was watching it. It's just when I look at it as a whole, like, there's definitely stuff that disappoints me, because I felt like it could have gone, I mean, definitely, aside from just like a main character dying in such a lackluster way. There's so much stuff, like the Lotor stuff, him being dead too the whole time. Minerva and not them not showing enough emotion, I felt, at least for her character, and what she felt when she saw Lotor. I felt like it was literally that flashback, and I felt like it should have been like a whole episode should have been devoted to her being upset that he was just dead. Like there's nothing she could do, and like that leading to the next step. And I felt it was just done in flashbacks and stuff. And I was like, that should have been a full episode to me. Even two, I could have been like, yep, that makes sense. I mean, they could easily take out the episode where they go to like the carnival. Even though I love that, Lance is so dumb that he signs all the things that are one of a kind, and then he gets one. And I thought that was just the funniest thing. I was like, he's so dumb, but that made me laugh. That did make me laugh, and Karan doing the screams. So that made me laugh like crazy. I still love that episode just for those silly moments. But yeah, they could cut that out. I would have been fine. Just take that out. Whole episode on Minerva and her emotions and what's happening. So could have used that. Could have used quite a few things. But that is Voltron season 7 or 8 or whatever, the last one. Definitely want to know what you guys thought about it. So please put your comments down in the comment section below. Favorite parts. I want to know your favorites. Least favorite parts, of course. What would you have changed? What do you wish was different aside, well, just in general, what do you wish was different about this season? I was going to say aside from Allura's death, but just what do you wish was different? How do you wish it was different? How would you have taken this final season and produced it compared to, what we actually got? So please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.